Now let's talk about Markov chain model. How we model that, we can have different probabilities, and we can get some sequence like biological sequence, and while using those transition and these other emission probabilities, we talk about them later. While using these probabilities, we can model some systems. So in this way we can have a Markov chain model. So Markov model is defined by a set of states. We have seen that in this Markov models there are states, like for example in the dice we have fair and loaded. Some states they emit symbols, like within the state you have symbols, like within the, while you are using a loaded die, you have some emissions, some outcomes coming out. You can get 1, 2 or 3 or 4 up to 6 different numbers. So these things are their emissions which are associated with their probabilities. We'll call them emission probabilities. Some states are begin states, they are silent. So sometimes we in our system we just model the initial state which is just a silent state. So system can start from anywhere, there is no symbol. So just to draw those begin and end states, we just simply put them in our models, but sometimes we can skip that. Then in addition to that, we have set of transitions with some associated probabilities, and these transitions from a given state, they are actually they define a distribution over the next possible states. So here is how we can formalize this. So let X be a sequence of random variables x1 up till xl. Basically it may be a nucleotide sequence, for instance. So that can have maybe a length like, for example, 10 nucleotides. So every position in that sequence can be presented as with these numbers like x1, x2, x3. So nucleotide position number 1, position number 2, position number 3, position number 4. So these all are different positions, and within each position then we can have A, G, C or T. So what we are observing here in this system is we are just observing those outcomes, whether A or C or G. So while looking into those outcomes, we are trying to draw some probability distribution. So that is our objective. So here is how we put that in this formal shape or in this equation. So if we know the sequence is of length x1 to xl, and we know that for each of these nucleotide positions, let's put them, for instance, these 5 circles over here. So we have this is x1 and this is x2 and x3 and x4. So if we are talking, or if we are moving, right now we are here on say for example x1. So probability of this x1 is actually dependent upon this guy, which is actually L, the last one. So it depends upon from where you are starting. So actually you are starting from here and you want to know about this guy. So here when you model that, we can have different transitions. So from L, then this is obviously your L minus 1, this is your L minus 2, and so far you reach to x1. So probability of this one can be dependent upon this guy. This depends on this depends on this. So when we put it together, we can have something like this. Then we start from the second last and we can move to the first one, and in the end we reach to the first one. So that is how we can calculate the conditional probability for this whole sequence, while we can take the conditional probabilities of all different chains or moves in this system and we take their product. But since Markov property is that the probability of some symbol or some position actually depends upon its previous, not on rest of them, so our model gets simplified like this. So here we can have this equation. So xl depends on L minus 1, L minus 1, and then on L minus 2, and so on until we reach this one. So when we formalize that, so this is our initial symbol, first one, and for rest of them we can substitute into this equation, which is xi, while xi minus 1. So at any place I depends upon the previous one, which is I minus 1, and this is the product. So we start from I is equal to 2 up till n. So we can get the probability of a whole sequence using this equation, where we have actually put this Markov chain property. This actually is the example of the first order Markov chains. We'll not talk about these complicated models, but my idea was just to give you a brief or a general idea about this whole new area or a subject. And I know that basically it's a special area of statistics. We'll just have a brief idea how we use them in our algorithms. Here is an example. We have some Markov models. There are two states. One is dry and one is rainy. If it is rain, there is 30% possibility. Then once there is a rain going on, 30% possibility that that particular day there will be the rain. And 70% is then probability that it will move to this dry state. And it can stay as long as once it's dry, it can stay for like with a probability of 80%, 0.8. And from dry to raining, it can move with a probability of 0.2. So here guys, these are your transition probabilities. Here are the probabilities in which the system is trying to stay. And though I have included in a previous section, but let's talk about emission probabilities for a while. So when it's rain, what you gonna do? You stay home. When it's dry, you go out. So what are these events which are embedded within them, or what your outcomes are here? What is the probability that you will stay out while it's raining? That is, you can substitute that. For example, I would like to stay home like 90%, so that is 0.9, and go out is then here is 0.1, the remaining ones. So those 0.9 and 0.1 here, and when it's dry, I will go out 90%, stay home 0.1 or 10%. So in that case, these probabilities are emission probabilities. So within the state, what symbols are emitted, what outcomes are there, and that is your emission probabilities. So in this section, we have seen that a stochastic model is used to model randomly changing system, assuming that future states depend only on the present state, but not on the states preceding that.